Hi everyone, I'm Camille, Georgeson-Usher. I am calling you from Toronto in my backyard with my dog, Kulu. Apologies if there's any sounds. This is the nature of living in COVID times and everything being on video. Yeah, I'm excited to share a little bit about what I've been up to since I participated in the Holdfast Festival in I think 2018, but I can't remember. Since then, and actually maybe I should give a little introduction of myself for those that don't know me. I currently live in Toronto. I am originally from Galiano Island, BC, which is on as far west as you can possibly go, with the exception of Vancouver Island. But it's a small island in between Vancouver and Victoria, and I grew up there when I was a kid, and then my mom and I moved to Vancouver and the surrounding area in Fort Langley, and that's kind of where I grew up. On my father's side, I'm a mix of Coast Salish from many nations. We're not really sure yet which ones specifically because of colonization. A lot of our history has been erased or just not kept. But then my grandmother is Dene from the Northwest Territories, and she now lives on Vancouver Island. And then on my mom's side, we're a mix of European ancestry, just a mush. So I grew up out west, and I moved to Montreal in 2010, I think, to do my undergrad in art history and studio arts at Concordia University, and it was the only university in the country that did that art history and studio arts degree. I think more places are doing it now, but at the time it was the only one. So I went there, and then I started to be mentored by Heather Gloliordi, who was a professor there. And then she convinced me to do my master's, so I stayed in Montreal to do my master's, which I never thought I would do. I never thought I'd go into grad school. But I finished my master's and then was again convinced to do a PhD with Dylan Robinson at Queen's University, which I'm still doing now, although I do procrastinate quite a bit these days. So I'm writing my PhD on the ways in which Indigenous folks living in urban centers travel through these spaces, the way that we gather in urban centers, the way that we create artwork in urban centers, and then I kind of look at some of the protocols involved with that. So what does it mean for me as a Coast Salish artist, as who creates public work, so a street artist? What does it mean for me to mark my work publicly in a city like Toronto, where it's not my territory and it's not my history? And so that's what I'm trying to talk about through it, but I also am really interested in the ways that theory impact Indigenous folks, Black folks, people of color, and what theories of the everyday have done. And from an Indigenous perspective, there's been very little theorization of everyday, just kind of like the way that we move through the world. So in terms of academic theory, there's very little in terms of Indigenous folks who've talked about that, so I'm trying to talk about that too. And it all comes back to this idea of gathering and the city as a site of gathering. So that's kind of my PhD. It consumes a lot of my thought process. It's all I think about. But it's great because it's my life. So it's both easy to write about and difficult to write about because it is my life. Outside of that, I have done a lot since, and so I think during Holdfast I actually was trying to see if I could not work and be an artist. So I was trying that year to just be an artist, and I found it impossible for me. I couldn't, it wasn't sustainable for me. So since then I came across, or I was reintroduced to folks at the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective, which is where I work now, and they just happened to have an opening for the Director of Programming position, and I was super interested. It was a very flexible position. I could keep doing my artistic practice and my PhD, and it would all come in. And so I applied and I got it, and shortly after there was a bit of a shift, and the opening for the executive director position opened up, and so I moved into that role in a kind of transition capacity. And so basically it was for 1 year, kind of an interim type thing, to try and figure out if the ACC could move to a non-hierarchical structure. And so in my time in that year, I figured out that it would be really difficult and it would probably take a really long time. And so I'm still the executive director moving forward, and I just love my work there, and I'm so energized by it. I have an amazing team of Indigenous women who are so powerful and so creative and so innovative, and it's given us, during the pandemic, it's been so amazing to have this kind of work family that, you know, we all really care for one another, and we all have very intentional meetings. So the way that we come together in the digital world is very intentional, and we make sure that our personal lives come first, so not pushing too hard, especially now when there's so much emotional turmoil. And so that's kind of been a really big focus for me, is just figuring out how to make workspaces better places and more human, so more open to human emotion and thoughts and feelings and vulnerabilities and all these kinds of things. So I'd say that the ACC kind of takes over most of my life, and during the pandemic we have done some pretty big things. So we right as the day that galleries and museums closed, it was in March, and myself and the current director of programming, Camille, we were actually in Regina trying to plan our in-person gathering, which we obviously canceled while we were in Regina, and we saw news of all the museums and galleries closing their doors, and Indigenous artists were just posting on social media, like people in our communities, about how they had contracts canceled, and how museums were putting projects on hold, and we just, sitting there, realized that we needed to do something. And within the span of a couple of hours, we launched an entire support program. So from the idea and seeing this whole thing unfold to launching a program called Curating Care, it was a couple of hours. And so basically what we did is we just offered honorariums to Indigenous artists that needed a bit of support, so that they could go to grocery stores and compete with the people that were hoarding toilet paper, for example. And so all we asked them to do was to submit a 2-minute video explaining who they are, what they do, and how they integrate care in the work that they do. And so now we just have this amazing archive of artists talking about care and, you know, in their work, and why it's so important in a time like this particularly, but also how it's kind of unfolded, especially with all the things that have come to light because of the pandemic. So that's been really amazing. And then after this, the County Council contacted us and asked us if we would administer funds to Indigenous artists as part of their emergency relief funding that they got. And so we had almost $500,000 to give away in emergency relief money to Indigenous artists, which was amazing. And so each person that applied got $1,000, and it, you know, they didn't have to create anything from it. They could use it to buy food, go fishing, you name it. And it was just really amazing to see what all these people are doing despite the times that we're in. So that's what I'm doing with the ACC. I think I can stop talking about it now. Outside of that, I am also on the curatorial team for Momenta, which is a biennial in Montreal, and so it'll be opening in September 2021. And so I've been doing a lot of work with the team for that, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be amazing. What else? I have done a lot of writing. I've written for Canadian Art a couple of times. And I have a work that is currently up in the Soundings exhibition. So it was curated by Dylan Robinson, who's my PhD supervisor, and Candace Hopkins. So the first edition of Soundings was at the Agnes Etherington in Kingston, Ontario. And I have a mural that's up on one of the walls that was for that first version of the exhibition. And now I've created a beaded fishing net, which took forever. It actually took like a year and a half to make because I didn't know what I was doing, and then I made it, and then I hated it, and then I had to remake it as we do as artists, you know, as distracted artists. So I finally finished it and shipped it to Vancouver, and the exhibition just opened and looks amazing, but I probably won't get to see it. So that's finished, and I'm on a couple of boards. So I am a board member for Art Space in Peterborough, and then I was just appointed as a board member for the Toronto Biennial of Art, which is exciting. I'm looking forward to, you know, seeing all the exciting things that they have coming up. And then outside of that, I really am just kind of trying to find some quiet in Toronto. It's been very stressful in these times. I would say that my garden gives me a lot of opportunity for that, and also for my pets. But I do a lot of gardening. I have some kale behind me, and I had squash taking over this whole wall. There's some green beans, and so that's something that I really love to do. And I'd say the last kind of thing is that I'm a long distance runner. Most people don't know that about me, but I run a lot. During the pandemic, I've been kind of injured and needing to like figure out injuries in my body, which has been a strange time to do that because you can't just like go to the doctor and go to physio or whatever. But I've run 10 marathons. One of which was an ultra marathon, which was really difficult. But the last marathon that I ran was in Quebec, and it was a lot of fun. It was with my old running buddies. So yeah, it was just really great. I was supposed to be running the Chicago Marathon this month, so in October 2020, but the world is falling apart, so I won't be doing that. Maybe next year. But otherwise, I'm just kind of you know, continuing to work on my PhD, still making sure that the ACC is supporting as many people as possible and is growing to reflect our communities and how our communities are changing. Yeah, I think that's it. And I hope I get to talk to all of you and see you all in person soon someday. Take care and be safe.